no obvious end in the White House and no easy way to end it. And a country hitting a brick wall in terms of the sheer numbers of deaths and the sheer scale of hospitalizations that we do not know how to handle. All at once. There is not going to be a Hollywood ending here, no matter what.
Cold Ease can shorten your cold by 42%.
What an incredible segment.
6 of them worked here at the Tyson Foods pork.
Let's back up a little bit.
That improve a good.
More than 270,000 Americans have died from COVID already. 6 of them worked here at the Tyson Foods pork processing plant in Waterloo, Iowa. Tyson Foods kept that plant open as more and more people kept getting COVID this spring, working shoulder to shoulder inside that plant. More than 1,000 people who work at that one plant caught COVID. 6 of them died. Some of the families of the employees who died have since sued the company, and you might have seen headlines recently about one of the explosive allegations that came out of that lawsuit, that one of the plant managers at that facility in Waterloo, Iowa, had allegedly, quote, organized a cash buy-in winner-take-all betting pool for supervisors and managers to wager how many employees would test positive for COVID-19. Now, Tyson seemed to respond to that allegation in the lawsuit quite seriously. They suspended plant managers at that Waterloo plant, the ones who were allegedly betting on how many of their employees would catch this deadly disease. They also hired an outside law firm to conduct an investigation led by former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. The CEO of Tyson flew to Waterloo, Iowa to talk to workers there in person. This is this gravely serious allegation in that lawsuit met by the company with a serious response. Well, now that same lawsuit has been amended with another new and dramatic allegation about what workers say happened at that Waterloo plant at the height of its outbreak. The families suing Tyson say plant managers at the Waterloo plant deliberately gave false information to non-English speaking workers. According to the complaint, at the time Tyson had knowledge that COVID was spreading through the plant, they instructed interpreters to tell non-English speaking employees, quote, everything is fine, and to tell them that county health officials had, quote, cleared the plant to continue operations. Neither of those things was true. The complaint says the county health department told Tyson around that time that actually they needed to close the plant. Ultimately, more than 1/3 of the workforce at that plant caught it. Now, Tyson's response to this newest terrible allegation is less forthcoming than it was to the first one. They have declined to comment specifically on this matter. They're citing the ongoing litigation. They did say they provided COVID training and education to employees in multiple languages, though. So there's that. The question is what you told them in multiple languages. What happened at that one plant in Iowa, more than 1,000 people infected, at least 6 dead. We're still getting to the bottom of just how bad this was. But what is also becoming clear is that the disaster at that plant was exacerbated not just by the alleged very callous behavior of the company toward its employees, but by the state of Iowa, too, who totally bought into everything the company told them. There's a blistering column in the Gazette newspaper today in Iowa. This is the local paper there. Written by Todd Dorman, that lays the blame for what happened at that Waterloo plant, not just at the feet of Tyson Foods, but at the governor's feet as well, Governor Kim Reynolds of Iowa. Because Tyson wasn't just telling its employees that everything was fine while the virus was spreading rampantly inside that plant. They were telling the governor that too, and she was happily lapping it up. When local health officials were begging Tyson to shut its doors to protect its employees, the governor said that she opposed the plant shutting down. Around the time Tyson plant managers were allegedly betting on the health and safety of their employees, while they were allegedly deliberately lying to them about whether the county had cleared the plant for it to be safe, Governor Reynolds said that she talked to the executives at Tyson who assured her that Tyson was doing everything they could to protect its workforce. Yeah, everything, including a winner-take-all betting pool on how many people would get sick and die. The consequences of what happened in Iowa earlier this year didn't end when that Tyson plant eventually did get shut down to try to get the virus under control. By that point, thousands of people were infected. The pork plant workers took the virus home to their families, spread it to their friends and to their community. Today, daily COVID deaths in Iowa are near their all-time high. November was Iowa's deadliest month since the pandemic began. Like so much of the country, Iowa is in trouble. Like much less of the country in Iowa, we know where a lot of that trouble started. Joining us now is Tony Thompson, who is the sheriff in Black Hawk County, Iowa, which is where that Tyson plant is located. He's somebody we check back in with frequently in April when so many of the employees there were getting sick. Sheriff Thompson, it's really nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us again.
It's my pleasure to be with you, Rachel. Thank you.
Let me just ask you how things are right now in Black Hawk County. Obviously, so much of the country right now is looking at unsustainable numbers and scary numbers. How are things right now in your part of Iowa?
I think it's the same as what the rest of the country is dealing with. You know, obviously this is a scary time, and COVID surging again. We just have different culprits now. It's more of a shotgun approach than it was one particular plant that was spreading it, in our community. Now it's everywhere, and that's frustrating on more of a global scale.
Yeah, and it's frustrating both strategically in terms of how you do it, but also just because trying to stop it at the outset, wasn't enough. And you were one of the local officials calling for that Tyson plant in Waterloo to close down when they were insisting on staying open. Now that is being literally litigated and the families of workers who were killed are bringing suit against the company, and all these very scary allegations are coming out. I just have to ask your response to some of these new allegations that are coming out of this lawsuit about how Tyson was handling the outbreak. Does it jibe with what you saw at the time?
It absolutely syncs with what we saw when we walked through the plant. It syncs with what we were getting at my emergency operations center, some of the information that caused us to want to go into the plant to begin with. It's, when Tyson says, yes, we had education, we had training, they had videos up that were talking about, hey, wash your hands in multiple languages and wear masks, even though less than maybe a third of the plant was actually wearing masks. When we walked through, we had family members of even USDA inspectors telling us that plant management was telling them that they didn't wear masks because it was scaring employees and things of that nature. So there was a lot of things going on that caused us and predicated us to want to be in the plant and visit the plant back there in April, rather. And so it certainly syncs up with some of that information back then.
The accountability is part of this, but obviously it's not like this is over. The response continues. Accountability is part of it, but telling the truth about what happened is the first step there. Sheriff Tony Thompson from Black Hawk County in Iowa. Sir, again, come back anytime. We'd love to stay apprised on how things are in your neck of the woods. Thanks for helping us understand.
My pleasure.
All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk about something that is not getting a lot of national attention, and I think ought to. There's a lot of noise about what the president is doing around pardons and his family and potential criminality right now. There's also the question of what the president is doing to kind of wreck the federal government on his way out the door. A big, important part of that is the subject of our next story. Stay with us.
One of the only
This is something that I generally can't get my head around. I don't understand the implications of it. I'm going to talk about it publicly here because I would like to shed some light on it because I'm hoping somebody can explain it. One reason I think it's not getting more attention is that I think nobody really understands why it's happening. But I do think it requires some scrutiny. But the basic question is this. Why, with 49 days left in office, is President Trump stacking the top ranks of the Pentagon with, forgive me, a bunch of junior-level screwballs? You'll recall that Trump ousted his defense secretary by tweet less than a week after the election. He then put a new guy in charge of policy at the Pentagon who says President Obama is a terrorist leader. He then installed 3 different guys who were at the heart of that whole thing where Trump said Obama wiretapped Trump Tower. 3 junior staffers who made up the heart of that whole debacle are now the chief of staff at the Pentagon, the top legal counsel at the NSA, and the chief of intelligence at the Pentagon. And that last guy, the new Pentagon intelligence chief, all of 34 years old, he's now not only the Pentagon's intelligence chief, he's also in charge of, well, you can't quite believe it. Trump's new last-minute lame duck defense secretary appointee just changed the structure of the military so that special operations, think like Navy SEALs, they all now report to that 34-year-old guy. And now that 34-year-old guy, the junior staffer who's running the Pentagon's intelligence operations and special ops, his name is Ezra Cohen, now he's just been given even more responsibility. The Trump administration has now suddenly and without warning ousted the head of the Defense Department's Defeat ISIS task force. This is an intelligence officer who's worked counterterrorism jobs in the U.S. government for 2 decades. His whole Defeat ISIS office has been disbanded, and his responsibilities have been handed over to Trump's brand new junior level appointees, Ezra Cohen and the Obama is a terrorist leader guy. Those guys are taking over the responsibilities from the guy who was running the operations against ISIS. The official that Trump just fired, the head of the Defeat ISIS task force, the Times notes that his office was, quote, in the midst of answering dozens of questions from the incoming Biden administration about the status of terrorist threats, relations with allies, and counterterrorism missions. The elimination of that office, that central hub, will, quote, almost certainly slow the flow of counterterrorism information to Biden transition aides. On top of all this, the Trump administration is also now saying that the annual defense budget should zero out all anti-ISIS work. This, of course, is right on the heels of disbanding the task force that is supposed to be fighting ISIS and ousting its top official. Why is all of this happening in the lame duck? We don't know what the end game here is or why they're going out of their way in the lame duck to make these very, very significant changes that are getting almost no attention. I'm hoping that my next guest may be able to shed some light on what is going on here or what this might mean, at least what to watch for next. Stay with us.
This is crazy.
Also tried Pepto-Bismol liquid.
Slotkin served as Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Affairs. She oversaw U.S. policy on Russia, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa in the Obama administration. She has years of defense and intelligence experience. Now, as a member of Congress from the great state of Michigan, Alyssa Slotkin sits on both the Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. Congresswoman Slotkin joins us live tonight. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. Thanks very much for making time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So I have been watching with sort of quiet consternation the changes at the top levels of the Pentagon since the election, since Mark Esper was fired as defense secretary just after the election. I spoke with a number of experts, and a couple of them suggested that I talk to you to try to get your take on what you think this might mean, or whether you see any sort of rhyme to this reason in terms of what might be behind these changes.
Yeah, well, I think when we see this many removals, it's one of 3 things, right? One, you can always wonder if there's gross negligence, if there's a problem with all of these different folks. I do not believe that's the issue, but that's always a reason why lots of people get fired all at once. Number 2 is because you're trying to clear the obstacles to do something operationally that maybe those folks didn't want you to do and argued against. And number 3 is just pure pettiness. Right, is that, people stood in the way of the president, and on his way out the door, he was going to make the point that if you weren't loyal to him, if you weren't supportive of him, he was going to get rid of you and put in people who were. A lot of arrows point to the last one, pettiness. But we do have to watch out for, what the president might be interested in doing in his last 49 days. And I know there's a lot of people concerned about it. I tend to believe that this is really mostly about pettiness, though, but it does have strategic consequences. Very few people know what the Office of the Secretary of Defense is. It's the civilian part of the Pentagon that provides civilian oversight over the military. It's designed that way. For generations, it's been that way. And when you completely gut an organization and put in people who are just loyalists to the president, it basically sort of undercuts that civilian control. And certainly if you're in a uniformed military, you want to know that the decisions that are being made about operations have real oversight. Someone's really thought through them and thought about the consequences. And there's no way that's going on right now with the folks that they've put in.
The official who was most recently ousted, the head of the Defeat ISIS task force, is not somebody who's got a high profile name. It's even the position is not a high profile thing. Christopher Mayer is his name.
In other words, we're not dealing with someone that's careless. We're dealing with someone that's reckless in putting so many people in place that there's no way of fact checking everybody towards figuring out if everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
I was struck by the reporting of the New York Times that one of the things that he has been doing is that he's been essentially point person within the Pentagon briefing the incoming Biden folks on counterterrorism matters about ISIS specifically, but also more broadly, and that the Biden transition folks are worried that him being ousted may be some effort to try to basically fluster their ability to get up to speed on counterterrorism matters in a seamless way.
Yeah, I worked closely with Chris Mayer. He's a wonderful civil servant. He's worked for both Democratic and Republican administrations. And I helped him set up the Defeat ISIS task force. So I feel very strongly about his capability. And obviously, this is horrible that this is going on for him. I don't know if if the intent was just to make it difficult for the Biden team to get their information. Honestly, particularly since they're also trying to zero out the money for the Defeat ISIS task force and those activities, it feels like the president is trying to burnish his sort of legacy and say, you know what, we took care of ISIS. That was on my watch. We're done with that. And it was more of a symbol in that way. But it's true. I've been a part of two transitions now between different administrations, and you need competent people who do the briefings and the updates, who walk you through current threats. And Chris would have been a fantastic person to do that, and it's going to be a big gap that he's gone.
Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin from Michigan, former senior Pentagon official, you are uniquely placed to help us understand the implications of these weird moves. Thanks for helping us understand. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Let's end our program tonight on that note. There's a lot of uncertainty and all these irregularities that's going on. If there's ever been a time that we needed to unite as a Christian society, a true, authentic Christian society, it is today. But once more, all I see is all these little bitty pieces of all these other different churches with all these different leaders going in thousands of different directions. I see the church suffering. I see the congregations dwindling. And I see storm clouds not just on the horizon, but above us. We need to pray. We need to pray for God's mercy. We need to pray for God's deliverance. We need to pray that God will give us the insight in where to go and what to do and how to do it. We are in dangerous territory right now. Shalom. May God be with us all.